Oare mă auziți? Da, sunt activ.
Aude Adrian, dacă îl
Da.
introduci tu pe domnul Dara.
Mr. Scott, you are online. Domnule Scott, sunteți online. I would like to ask you to share your screen, your presentation. I already shared 2 presentations, the notes and the arts.
Is that working? Can you see that?
One moment. Yes, it's working.
Brilliant.
But you are sharing your Romanian presentation. Would you like to share your English one?
Well, I plan to do sure. I have my notes in English and I have the Romanian. I thought it would be easier for everyone to have the Romanian presentation, so I'm happy with that if you're happy.
Okay, yes, it's okay. Deci, dragi participanți, acum ne prezintă domnul Dara Scott. Este cercetător în cadrul producției Hive Alive și îl las să ne prezinte subiectul algelor marine ca și un substituent, un suport în alimentația albinei. Mr. Scott, you have the word, please.
Cool, thank you. As a bună and salut. My name is Dara Scott, Managing Director of Advanced Science, the company that makes Hive Alive. It's great to be able to speak with everybody today. I've been to Romania, I've been to a beekeeping show. I know how serious and passionate people are in Romania about beekeeping. So I was very impressed when I was there. So it's great to be able to speak to everyone and have a chance to talk about seaweeds and Hive Alive.
One word more. Cine dorește să vadă și explicațiile slide-urilor în limba română, poate alege prezentatorul Bogdanu Fertare. Acolo avem inclusiv explicații în limba română. Sorry, Mr. Scott, I forgot to present the notes that they can.
Perfect. Yeah. So there's notes in English and notes in Romanian as well. Yeah, great. So where would I go? Yeah, so my talk won't be very long. So there'll be lots of time for questions afterwards if people want to ask questions, which I find is the best thing to do. Anyway, so let's talk first about seaweeds. So just to go through briefly, we'll be talking about seaweeds, humans, seaweeds and animals, seaweeds and bees, and then the benefits of seaweeds that are in Hive Alive, the results of our trials, and then how to use Hive Alive. So, okay. So seaweeds have been eaten by humans for over 18,000 years, pretty much anywhere where seaweeds are available. And their use has been documented as a food and as a medicine. The long-lived Japanese are famous for eating seaweeds in foods like sushi, and in Ireland, where I'm from, it has a long history of seaweed use. We've used seaweeds for hundreds of years to help plants grow as a fertilizer, which is especially important in the west of Ireland, where I'm from again, because we have very poor soil. And in Ireland also, there's a particular species of seaweed that's used traditionally as a medicine for honey, or medicine for colds and flus and bronchitis. It's actually mixed with honey and with lemon. And I thought this was only an Irish thing, but looking more up into this, it seems that this is done in a number of different countries as far away as Venezuela. And nearly every country that has access to seaweeds has used them as medicines. From Malaysia to the Caribbean, from New Zealand to North America, from Greece to Japan, they've all had a wide range of medicinal use, from lung cancer to gut parasites to tumors and to syphilis. More recently, scientists have discovered that individual seaweed extracts have been found to be beneficial in digestive health and in tackling diseases such as diabetes, osteoporosis, and cancers. So animals and seaweeds. A lot of animals eat seaweeds naturally, but up until recently, seaweeds in animal feeds was not as widespread as it is as food for humans. Seaweeds have been fed to animals traditionally for their nutritional content, but it's only since the science has become more advanced and we know exactly the different parts of seaweed that are most beneficial for the animals that seaweeds are starting to getting more popular as an animal feed. And since then, the seaweeds and animal feeds has rapidly increased. Very interesting compounds are now extracted from seaweeds. For instance, seaweeds have large amounts of polysaccharides. Polysaccharides are complex, long chain sugar molecules that can do lots of amazing things, like protect the gut lining or help increase good probiotic bacteria found in the gut that probiotic can feed off the polysaccharides. And a number of seaweeds have excellent antibacterial, antifungal, and antiviral properties. And even more recently, seaweeds have been shown to have immune stimulatory properties, which help animals better defend against diseases. All these benefits lead to overall better animal health. And a result of having better health, productivity is increased. Seaweed extracts are now tailored to the specific animal for specific purposes. For example, in fish farming, there's a seaweed extract that's fed to the fish that stops lice attaching to the fish. In cattle farming, extracts are used for weight gain, for improved gut health, nutrient absorption, reproductive health, and milk quality. The same is done with horses, sheep, pigs, poultry, and seaweeds are now even fed to pets like dogs and cats. So it's clear that seaweeds have benefits for animals and humans, but what about honeybees? So a bunch of French researchers did some work on seaweed extracts. Oh, sorry, before that, the work had previous done to that was there were seaweed extracts were used in blocking the entry of the malarial parasite into human cells. So some French researchers wanted to see if this same theory could be applied to honeybees. In particular, they were looking at Nosema. And they set out experiments to find out if feeding seaweed polysaccharides could block the attachment of Nosema cells that cause intestinal issues in bees. And they found that by feeding different seaweed polysaccharides, Nosema was reduced and the honeybee's survival was improved. They believe the seaweeds are able to do this by blocking the adhesion of a Nosema spores to the gut wall, thus stopping their life cycle. And I don't know how many people know about Nosema, but basically Nosema to reproduce has to penetrate the gut wall, the epithelial cells of the gut. It goes into the gut, uses the energy of those cells to reproduce, and then bursts out of those cells into the gut. And the whole process of this basically damages the gut. And by damaging the gut, you're compromising the bee health. We know the studies to show that things like pesticides affect bees with Nosema way more than bees that don't have Nosema. We know that they just don't do as well. They're always compromised. And Nosema, particularly Nosema ceranae, is nowadays pretty much always around all year, and nearly every colony has it to some extent. And unfortunately, in some ways you don't see obvious symptoms of it. But it's there, and when it's there, it is always damaging the gut. So the bees might survive, might live, and might look okay, but they're never being as strong or productive as they could be if they didn't have Nosema. Anyway, the scientists also said that the seaweeds may also improve survival and decrease spore levels by activating the immune response system. And interesting, since I developed Hive Alive, I've been told by lots of beekeepers that they've seen bees eating seaweeds on the seashore from all over, from New Zealand to Ireland to Canada. Different places told me that the bees will eat the seaweed. So, Hive Alive. So what is Hive Alive? Hive Alive is a concentrated liquid feed supplement for bees to maintain colony strength. And the bulk of Hive Alive is made up of our unique blend of seaweed extracts called Osha Shield, and also contains thymol and lemongrass. The extracts that we use in Osha Shield are specifically selected for honeybee health, and the seaweeds that we use a patented cold process technique. It's cold to make sure that the bioactives, the active parts of the seaweed, don't get damaged. The seaweed extracts we focus on are antimicrobial, antiviral, antifungal, and immune boosting, along with some prebiotic bacteria. That's the prebiotics are the food that the good bacteria likes to eat. Hive Alive also has lemongrass. Lemongrass is commonly used in beekeeping. It calms the bees and makes the sugar syrup more attractive to them. We would like to think we have the optimal concentration of lemongrass in Hive Alive, because in many cases some products have too much lemongrass, which can cause robbing, and that's just not ideal at all. And that's one of the reasons why we recommend don't use Hive Alive with other products that have lemongrass, because you get too high lemongrass concentration. Hive Alive is fine to use with other supplements. Lemongrass also has antimicrobial properties as well. Hive Alive also contains thymol. Thymol has been used as a treatment for nosema for a long time. It's over 100 years now. But one of the main drawbacks of using thymol was that it could separate out in the syrup. And what happens is it separates out, the concentration gets too high, the bees will either die from eating it, or they will just not take down the syrup at all. And it tends to fall down to the higher cost of the bottom of the feeder, and bees tend to feed from the bottom of feeders anyway, so it makes it sort of doubly bad. Anyway, we've got a unique emulsification process that ensures it blends easily to syrup and doesn't cause separation or recrystallization. Even if you're storing syrup that has Hive Alive in it for 6 months, it still won't separate out. So why would beekeepers use Hive Alive? The 4 main reasons we give for using Hive Alive is that the beekeeper gets reduced nosema spores, reduced nosema levels, more bees, more honey, and improved overwinter survival. Hive Alive has been shown to reduce nosema levels. In fact, it's the only product proven to maintain low nosema levels. I'll talk about all this in a second with graphs and stuff. We can't make claims about disease on our labeling, on our marketing, and we normally communicate this as improved gut health. And like I said, a lot of people think they don't have a problem with nosema, but nosema is nearly always prevalent and nearly always affecting the general well-being and productivity of bees. Hive Alive has also been shown to give more bees. The trials demonstrate that we've done demonstrate an increase in colony population when Hive Alive was fed. And also, along with the higher colony population, you of course get higher honey yields as well. A lot of beekeepers feed Hive Alive in the autumn to help their colonies survive the winter. Trials demonstrate increased survival rates in the groups that are fed Hive Alive. Additionally, we've also carried out tests that show that Hive Alive inhibits the growth of American foul brood and the fungus that causes chalk brood, Ascaferus. So this is the first graph. These are the results that support our claims. This research was carried in Hive Alive by one of the world's top bee researchers and published in the Journal of Apicultural Research. All this stuff is on our website. There's a page called Science Behind Hive Alive. There's links to the trials, there's links to the publications. So if you anything you missed or you want to go back and check on it again, it's all there at hivelivebees.com. So as I said, we can't make any claims about disease on our website, etc. But the fact that Hive Alive has an effect in keeping nosema levels low is probably the biggest reason why beekeepers choose Hive Alive. In these trials, all the trials were using 20 colonies per group. All the results are statistically significant. And we have multiple data points over it, so we're not just cherry picking one time point that worked the best. We're showing a trend, so it's very clear to see the results of Hive Alive. So all the trials carried out were fed 4 liters of Hive Alive activated syrup in the autumn and 4 liters in the spring, which is our recommended feeding instructions. And this is the graph of nosema spore counts. The orange line is the Hive Alive group, and the black line is the control group. And you can see the orange line is lower than the black group, than the control group. The Hive Alive group is lower than the control group. And you can see that difference is getting larger over time. By the end of the trial, the Hive Alive group had 57% less nosema spores than the control group. So we know that Hive Alive affects the active stage of nosema in the bee gut. And we also know that when Hive Alive is stored in the comb, particularly over winter time, it actually breaks down the nosema spores, also the foul brood spores and the chalk brood spores. So again, making less disease prevalent and making the bees better able to survive and be healthier and come out of the winter strong. We've lots of beekeepers reporting these findings, like lots of other beekeepers report these findings to us, like in the quote at the bottom of this slide, but we don't use them on our website and stuff because we're not allowed. Now, looking at the claim that Hive Alive gives more bees. So the same trial, here's a graph of colony population. It's the number of bees over time. The population was measured in April, September, November, and then March and May the next year. The orange line again is the Hive Alive groups, and the black line is the control groups. And the green bars is the percentage difference between Hive Alive and control. So you can see the difference between the two groups gets larger and larger over time. And by the end of the trial, the Hive Alive group had 89%, nearly twice as many bees than the control group. You also can see that here that the effects of Hive Alive are long-term. It's not a quick fix product, but that they're gradual and long-term and steadily getting better and better results the longer it goes on. Again, lots of feedbacks, lots of reports, the same thing with beekeepers having, you know, extra bees doing really well, hives exploding, stuff like that. And here's another trial that monitored the number of bees as well, the Hive Alive versus control. Again, the same colors. It's a graph colony population. Orange is the Hive Alive group, and again, those green bars are the percentage difference. And again, you see the same trend. The percentage difference between the Hive Alive and the control gets bigger and bigger all the time. Yeah, this was the timeline of this was sort of the first half of the graph there is June, July, August, and the second part then is March, April, May of the following year. So moving on to honey production, the honey stores are measured in this trial, again the same timeline, and again the same colors, and the green is the percentage difference of honey production versus control, Hive Alive versus control. At the end of the trial, the Hive Alive group had 45% more honey than the control group. And this is also reported in beekeepers. A lot of the largest honey producers in New Zealand feed Hive Alive, and one such beekeeper noted that they have an average 25% increase in production when feeding Hive Alive. So Hive Alive also improves overwinter survival. The control group had 15% losses, whereas the Hive Alive group did not have any. We believe this is due to the fact that hives are stronger and healthy going into and overwinter and better able to defend against disease. Starting the long winter with a healthier gut is very important due to the fact that the bees can't generally get out for many cleansing flights. And this makes Hive Alive particularly attractive in areas where you've got cold winters. And you can see on the right hand side the quotes that, you know, lots of beekeepers are reporting exactly the same thing that the studies have shown. Here is some in vitro trials on both foul brood and on chalk brood. And basically, this is the studies were using the normal Hive Alive feeding concentrations, and you can see on the left of each of the pairs there, you can see the control group, you can see the growth of both the bacteria and the fungus, and on the right hand side of each of the pairs, you can see how basically there's no growth. So basically, it's very clear the effect Hive Alive can have. So it's important to stress that Hive Alive isn't a treatment for foul brood. If you have foul brood, Hive Alive is not going to work. But the whole idea of Hive Alive is that you're keeping pathogens levels low, disease levels low in the colony, and this allows the colony to thrive. It also takes less chance of, you know, getting overwhelmed by foul brood, overwhelmed by chalk brood, and allows them to build up strong. Without being threatened all the time by disease. And of course, like things like chalk brood and foul brood, those spores are always around. It's just a question of maintaining, you know, when the colony succumbs to them or when a colony is affected by them because they get too strong in the hive, and that's when you start seeing problems. So the more you can take care of the bees before they get sick, the better your colony is going to do. So how to use Hive Alive? Well, the basic instructions is 2.5 mils per liter of syrup. That makes it actually, if you think about it, very concentrated, and the small bottle goes a long way. So we basically just add, or beekeepers just add 10 mils of Hive Alive for every 4 liters of syrup. And And the minimum we recommend feeding really is 4 liters of syrup. And ideally, ideally they're fed in the winter time and also in the springtime. But if you're going to feed one time, definitely, sorry, the autumn time, I should say, not the winter time. If you're only going to feed one time, definitely the best time to feed is the autumn time, because they'll be eating it for a longer period of time over the winter. And while the syrup with Hive Alive is being stored in the comb, it's also breaking down, like I said, the nosema spores, chalkbrood spores, fallbrood spores, and keeping the colony cleaner. And ideally, when you're feeding, it's all the syrup fed that has Hive Alive added to. That's for the best effect, but obviously there's practical limitations, that costs and stuff like that. But so we recommend the minimum feeding is 4 liters of syrup with Hive Alive in it. And for weaker colonies and colonies that might not be feeding, we recommend spraying or drenching. And this can be done with a light sugar syrup, like a 1-to-1 sugar syrup, using a higher concentration of 1-to-100. What's nice about this is that if you do spray them or do drench them, or even if you, is that once they get the smell of it, they'll know, they'll be able to follow their smell up to the feeder as well. So they'll start taking out food from the feeder. So for instance, if the bees might be strong, but maybe not taking other food for some reason, just dribble a little bit on the frame, they'll get the smell of it, and straight away they'll start running up to the feeder to take the food down. We recommend spraying once a week for 3 weeks to cover the full brood cycle. And important to spray just to lightly wet the bees. Don't drown the bees with syrup. Don't put too much that they actually end up drowning. That would certainly not be good. So spray and drenching does give a varroa drop. It's not enough really to make it a full treatment without using proper normal varroicides and stuff like that, but it definitely helps. And we particularly recommend it in the early spring when there's very little or no brood, and all the mites are phoretic, they're on the bees, and that allows you get a significant mite drop. If you do it once a week for 3 weeks, you're getting over a full brood cycle. And it's important. The benefit of that actually is great, because what happens is that the lower levels you start off in the spring with will directly be correlated to how much your mites build up throughout the year. So if you can knock them back earlier, that's great. And we recommend, instead of using smoke in the spring, just bring a spray bottle with Hive Alive in it. When the colonies are small like that, it's easy. You just spray the frames as you're inspecting them, and it's 2 jobs in 1 done. Hive Alive can also be added to homemade protein patties, candy or fondant. If adding to protein patties, we recommend a concentration between 5 and 10 mL of Hive Alive per kilo patty. If adding to the fondant, the concentration should be 2.5 ml per kilo. And the important part of this is that the temperature must be below 50 degrees Celsius. If you have it above 50 degrees Celsius, it can damage the actives, the seaweed actives in particular, in Hive Alive. So keep it below. So when it's nearly cool, then you can add the Hive Alive. Yeah, like I mentioned about spraying, you can use spray instead of as smoke. It helps calm them down, doing hive inspections. And like I said, it's great to do that early in the spring in particular. It's also great for encouraging bees to clean up old frames or draw out new wax, to spray or brush on a light sugar solution with Hive Alive, and that they'll draw it out much quicker. And then other reasons feeding Hive Alive would be to increase the attractiveness of syrup to bees, maybe they're not taking down syrup, add a bit of Hive Alive to it, like I said, dribble some down the frames and whoop, they go straight up. And maybe the most important reason, or important additional reason for using Hive Alive is it stops syrup from fermenting. So it means your gear doesn't go moldy and get that black mold in the feeders. It means that when they're taking down the syrup, if you feed it late in the year, say it gets cold quick and they haven't dried out all the syrup in the comb, it's not going to go bad and moldy, and they're going to be eating moldy syrup in the frames. And it also allows beekeepers to store syrup. So if you didn't get to use all the syrup one side of the season, you can use it later on the next year, and it won't have gone bad, which is great. And it's used for the introduction of new queens, using a spray or something like that, syrup with Hive Alive in it as a spray on the colony before you add a new queen, because it masks the queen pheromones and it's easier to introduce that way. Yeah. So talking numbers for a second of how Hive Alive can be beneficial to a colony. Depending on the size of the bottle of Hive Life you get, it costs about 3 lei per hive, and it can be slightly more or less depending on the bottle size, stuff like that. So this guy here, we'll call him Popescu. I'm not saying that right, but that's my best way of saying it. Let's see how he can benefit from using Hive Alive. So say he's running a small operation with 50 hives, and he's mainly interested in honey production. So Popescu didn't use the Hive Alive, but he still did okay, and he got about 50 kilos of honey, and he sold it for 10 lei per kilo, and ended up making 25,000 lei. So say you decide to use half the recommended dose of Hive Alive and fed it just once a year. We know from studies he can get up to over 40% increase in honey production using Hive Alive, but say he only got 10% increase in honey. Even with a 10% increase, he makes an extra 2,500 lei. And if you take away the 150 lei, the cost of the Hive Alive, he cleared an extra 2,350. And that's a conservative 10%. So say he feeds Hive Alive twice a year and gets a 40% increase, he's now clearing an extra 10,000 in profit. And if you take away the 300 lei cost of the 2 Hive Alive feedings, he clears 9,700 lei. And that's just taking honey production into account. It's not taking into account the fact that he might also sell some bees, and because we know Hive Alive builds bigger populations or bigger colonies, and he will probably get lower overwinter losses, all this leading to more money in his pocket. So to sum up, seaweeds have been used for thousands of years by humans as foods and medicines. Animals also eat them, but nowadays technology has moved on to allow us to pull out specific seaweed extracts for specific purposes. Science has shown that seaweed extracts can have an effect on nosema, and scientific research on Hive Alive shows it's able to keep nosema levels low, increase colony populations, and honey return. This data is shown over many data points. It's statistically significant and using large colonies, number of colonies per group. In fact, Hive Alive is unique as it's still the only feed supplement with published proven data to show it works long-term, and the only product to show the long-term low nosema levels. I mean, Hive Alive does have short-term benefits, but they're not the main reason why beekeepers would use Hive Alive. Hive Alive's long-term benefits improve year on year, and this has been proven. It's also cost-effective to the beekeeper, giving large returns of productivity with a relatively small investment. And it's easy to use and doesn't require any extra time or work by the beekeeper. It's reassuring to know that it uses natural, safe, and edible ingredients, and beekeepers love that it's so versatile because it has so many other benefits besides just the colony population and the nosema. I believe the Hive Alive should form the part of every beekeeper's feeding regime to keep colonies strong, healthy, and productive in the long term. And that's pretty much it. There's an info, if anyone wants to contact us, there's some ways of contacting us, info@HiveAlive.bees. If you want to be kept up to date with the newsletter, there's you can email us as well, and we'll add you to the newsletter list. And that's pretty much all my talk. So I'd be delighted to answer any questions that people have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Scott. You underline one very important point in beekeeping, edible. What I find that we should use just things what is allowed to eat and is not poisonous.
Yeah.
This should be the way that we treat our bees, because we eat everything what came out from the hive. So I think that after our Congress, we have all the instruments to treat the bees in a very friendly way, with products which are can you name them as edible or ecological, yeah, without chemicals. Thank you.
Yeah, and I also kind of would believe as well, I didn't talk about that much, but that products that have really strong short-term effects generally tend to have long-term effects that aren't necessarily always beneficial. That's why I really like Hive Alive, and that it's a slow, steady keeping colonies healthy, as opposed to, you know, you give antibiotics to someone or something, and yeah, sure, it works in the short term, but generally there's long term, there's like gut problems afterwards and things like that, or strong chemicals, they have side effects afterwards. So the nice thing about Hive Alive is it's important that it's the only one that we know of that's showing long-term steady increase, opposed to, you know, I give it something, here's a reaction, I got this, but nobody looks at it afterwards. What's the long-term effect on the colony?
Yes, yes, thank you very much. Dacă are cineva întrebări, să traduc și în română ce am zis. Important este ca produsele pe care le ținem, le folosim în tratarea stufilor să poată fi inclusiv consumate fără probleme, fără să ne creeze intoxicații. Ceea ce putem face acum după congres, avem chiar toate instrumentele să facem un tratament ecologic al stufilor fără să introducem chimicale. Vă mulțumesc. Alina?
Yes, hello, Mr. Dara. Thank you for your splendid conference. I want to ask you some question. You make a treatment with these products together with the other, who it use it in the bioagriculture?
Sorry, say again?
You make a treatment in the beehive near these products with the other products in your country?
With other products?
Yes. Like essential oil, like, I don't know, probiotics or something like this.
Yeah, so a couple of points on that. We've just done some recent data that shows that Hive Live works very well with probiotics. So we have found that used sort of a week or two apart, that there seems to be a synergy, and they do better than if they were on their own. They actually do much better on their own, which is great. That's partially probably because the probiotics or the prebiotics in Hive Alive. It just seems to work better. And the other part of that then is that we know that Hive Alive works very well when you're using a thymol-based miticide, a varroacide. So sometimes, and I've found in the past, is that when you put in certain thymol-based varroa products, they can be very strong, they can very stress out the colony a lot, and they might hang outside or leave the colony, or depends on the heat and the temperature. Whereas if you feed Hive Alive in advance, say a week or two in advance, they get used to the small amount of thymol that's in Hive Alive. They get used to that smell. So when you add in the varroa-based miticides, it's they don't go into shock. They're much more comfortable with it. As to adding other essential oils and stuff like that to or at the same time as Hive Alive, I certainly wouldn't be adding very strong ones along with Hive Alive as well. I think a combination of lots of stuff together would be just too much. Yeah, I would do that carefully. Does that answer?
Thank you.
And what do you think about the pesticides, insecticides you use our product?
In Ireland, yeah, I'm lucky I'm in the west of Ireland. We don't have so much of a problem because it's not so intensively agriculture, but I know in the south, in particular the southeast, we have a lot of people with problems around the time of rapeseed and stuff like that, where yeah, they get bee losses and stuff like that. The bees get stressed and the colonies get very small very quick. Yes.
Adrian, traduci pentru noi, pentru români?
Dacă citeam o întrebare, nu am fost atent la ce a zis.
Ok. Deci, concluzia este... Sorry, I will translate from Romanian people. One second, ok? În momentul în care l-am întrebat dacă mai folosește și alte produse pe lângă acest produs ca și tratamente în stupină, concluzia a fost că da, s-ar putea folosi și altele, dar nu neapărat este necesar, pentru că pentru multe probleme pe care sunt în zona dânșilor, nu au nevoie în insula respectivă să folosească mai multe tratamente. Uneori mai merg și înspre alte tratamente, dar doar în momentul în care sunt probleme în stupină. L-am întrebat dacă acolo unde au probleme cu agricultura intensivă, dacă nu este necesar ceva care să ajute pentru pentru pesticide și insecticide, pentru că acolo avem nevoie de un chelator, clar, ceva trebuie să ajute albinele ca să scoată din corpul lor, iar algele sunt și ele chelatoare, dar nu sunt perfecte. Răspunsul a fost că au mortalitate în acele zone și sunt într-adevăr, mai ales la culețul de rapiță, au o problemă și nu este suficient doar Hive Alive. Yes? If you want, Adrian, you can ask the next question.
One question would be, does Hive Alive been influenced by air humidity, temperature, or other treatments?
Yeah, so we've kind of talked about other treatments, certainly nothing else with lemongrass in it, but to talk about air temperature and humidity, so Hive Alive is used in over 40 countries around the world, from really hot countries to really dry countries to really wet countries like where I live to really cold countries. We're up in northern Norway, up in northern Canada. So we're in the Middle East, we're in Australia, we're all over the world basically, and we've never come across an issue with temperature or humidity or anything like that. We've never actually come across with it other than lemongrass, but people kind of know not to add lemongrass products in conjunction with ours. But other than that, we've never had an issue with using Hive Alive in conjunction with other products.
Deci, la întrebarea dacă Hive Alive este influențat de temperatură, umiditate, răspunsul este nu, e folosit în 40 de țări fără probleme. Iar legat de problema utilizării cu alte tratamente, e important să nu folosiți lemongrass când utilizați Hive Alive.
Datorită conținutului de lemongrass care este totuși în interior și care trebuie să specificăm asta ca să înțeleagă oamenii de ce, lemongrassul este repelent. Repelent înseamnă că este contra insectelor. Ei pun o cantitate extrem de mică de lemongrass tocmai pentru a atrage insectele, pentru mirosul pe care îl are. Dar dacă puneți prea mult, riscați să scoateți toate albinele afară din stup. Deci trebuie foarte atent să fiți, să nu adăugați mai mult de atât, pentru că ei au găsit o doză care este la limită, care nu produce furtișag și care nu determină albinele să fie disturbate. Ca să înțelegeți de ce.
Ar mai fi o întrebare dacă Hive Alive-ul ajută dacă rămân rezerve de iarbă neagră sau mană.
You know, if you have inside in the beehive the honey who have a lot of minerals like Calluna vulgaris honey, can help this product Hive Alive to don't have a problem with the spore of the nosema?
Can Hive Alive help with the spores?
Help to don't give the way inside in the beehive to develop the spore of the nosema.
Yeah. So it helps in the gut, but it also helps in the hive itself. So we know that we've done studies to show that the Hive Alive will actually break down the spore wall and kill the spores of nosema, and also with the foul brood and the chalk brood. So it basically stops it from reproducing, because the problem with nosema nowadays is that Nosema apis used to be around, and that was a very short-term problem. It would happen over the winter, and by the spring, when the bees could fly again, it would go away. But Nosema ceranae stays all the time, and part of the reason why that stays all the time is that the spores are viable all the time in the colony. The spores are around, and in particular in the colony, and so the bees are re-eating the spores and getting reinfected. That's why medicines in the US, like fumigillin, don't work very well on Nosema ceranae, because they were designed for apis, the short-term effect of apis, and fumigillin only kills the active stage of the nosema, not the spore stage. So you treat fumigillin, the spore count drops, all of a sudden it looks great, but then they start eating it straight away again, and it starts coming back again, and the levels are back up again. Plus you've now stressed out the colony with a very strong antibiotic. So that's the beauty of Hive Alive, I suppose, really.
Okay, the explanation, it's perfect that I translate for the people. Răspunsul pe care ni-l dă dânsul este că da, putem să folosim acest produs, să spun așa, ca să menținem un număr de spori în interior. Dar cred că n-a înțeles că este vorba de iarbă neagră care are o grămadă de minerale și care determină de fapt diarea, da? Care produce într-un final această problemă cu sporii de nosemoză. Nu știu dacă chiar are cunoștință, dar încerc să-l mai întreb încă o dată. You know the honey Calluna vulgaris? Calluna vulgaris honey? It's a black one.
Yeah.
Or honeydew honey, you know honeydew honey?
Yeah. I know both of those.
Okay, in the moment when you, in the moment when you go in the winter and you have in the beehive this kind of honey, the people have a problem with the diarrhea. And after this, they have a problem with the nosemose and all this. You think if we don't put out this honey from the beehive and we use this Hive Alive, it's possible to be already okay inside in the beehive and to maintain the health of the hive?
Oh yeah. Especially we know that happens. Like Germany, we have honeydew, and we use beekeepers who use the product because of that.
And you think that over the winter they can survive if they remain with this honey inside in the beehive?
Oh, only eating that. Well, they have to. The syrup with Hive Alive would have to be fed too. But I think that. So the idea of the Hive Alive is they're eating it over the winter time as well. It's not just, feed it for a short period of time and the problem just goes away. So they need to be eating it over the winter time. So you need to give them enough of the Hive Alive syrup so they're eating it. Yeah. But if they're just eating honeydew over the winter time, no.
Mă gândesc că soluția este să diluezi sursele de hrană care sunt deja în stup cu surse noi, cum este siropul cu Hive Alive. Și atunci albinele au șanse mai mari să supraviețuiască în condiții bune decât dacă ar fi rămas doar cu mierea de Calluna vulgaris.
Părerea mea personală este că nu este o soluție bună să stăm doar pe astfel de depozite, să zic așa, în stup cu miere de mană sau miere de iarbă neagră și doar să dăm acest produs. Părerea mea este că nu o să poată să oprească acest produs diarea care se produce propriu-zis pe perioada iernii și concluzia mea este că ar trebui să scoateți cel puțin parțial și să dați sirop cu Hive Alive în așa fel încât să se regleze numărul de spori, dar este strict părerea mea.
E de presupus că întrebarea se referea la rămășițe de astfel de miere în stup. Ne gândim la mierea care e stocată pe lângă puieți și așa mai departe, pentru că nu cred că cineva risipește această miere foarte prețioasă ca să o lase acolo în cuib, nu?
Răspunsul era foarte clar, dacă poate să supraviețuiască albina folosind acest produs, dacă rămâne mierea în interior. Deci, yes, now we understand exactly what's happened. Thank you for your answer. You suggest to feed bees during the winter with syrup?
Well, feed them in the autumn time so that the syrup has been stored and they're eating the Hive Alive syrup over the winter time. And I was thinking what you could possibly experiment with is sort of using with the honeydew is you could probably maybe half try and do in such a way that you're feeding a certain amount of Hive Alive so that over the winter time they're eating some Hive Alive and some honeydew, and that might be able to work.
Thank you.
Da, deci răspunsul dânsului este că ar trebui să fie măcar jumătate sirop care să conțină Hive Alive și doar rămășițe, exact așa cum zicea și Cătălin, eventual de miere de iarbă neagră. Nu cred că eu rămân la poziția mea că ar fi bine să o eliminați din stup, dacă într-adevăr ajungeți cu ea să fiți ultima.
Important este să nu riscăm. Important este să nu riscăm. Nu așa. Faceți niște experimente, dacă reușiți să treceți cu bine iarna.
The important is to don't risk. We can do some experiment, but first I think it's necessary to make an experiment first and after to see if it's working or not, because this is special honey here from Romania. So some of the people go and the last harvest of the honey can be Calluna vulgaris honey. So I think it's better to make a test first and after to see if it's working or not. Maybe for the next Congress, we will find the information, perfect information for this question. Why not?
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah.
One more question from Mr. Janos Pendergirac. Do you feed the hives continuously with Hive Alive?
The easiest way to do it is whenever you're feeding sugar syrup is to add Hive Alive. You don't want to feed Hive Alive when there's a flow on, when there's a honey flow on. We recommend stop feeding Hive Alive 2 weeks in advance, and the main reason for that is you don't want your honey flavored with seaweed and thymol and lemongrass. Like I said, the ingredients are edible, but you don't want to flavor your honey. So really, I mean, I wouldn't, and I don't recommend people feed syrup without, like, syrup isn't ideal to feed, obviously, and Hive Alive helps that. And so if people are feeding syrup, they should use I recommend they use Hive Alive with it. And again, the most important time is in the autumn. So they're storing it for a long time in the comb. They're eating for a long time. That's the best time is the autumn.
Deci ne spune domnul Scott că hrănirile cele mai bune sunt cele de completare. Să nu hrănim în mod permanent supii cu Hive Alive, deoarece conține arome care provin inclusiv de la lemongrass, ceea ce este logic.